Good morning and welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. Of course, the topic of our class today is Psalm 34, and we're gonna read through that psalm and think about what the resonances of that psalm are. Of course, we're in a specific part of the Jewish calendar year between Pesach and Shavuot, where we're counting the Omer, and we're in the week between Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, which was yesterday, and Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, which we celebrate next week, and celebrate the establishment of the State of Israel and remember all of those whose lives have been lost in service to that state. And of course, in our own congregation, we have just learned of the terrible desecration of our cemetery. And I think that it's important to mark this moment in in the Jewish people's consciousness and in our community's consciousness, because the Psalms that we read and the way that we read Psalms are affected by our emotional state at any time that we're coming to them. And so we always ask the question, if we were going to use this Psalm as a prayer, if we were going to rely on this Psalm at a particular moment, what moment would that be? How would we what emotions are evoked by this psalm, and what emotional state might we be in when we want to use this psalm, and is it working for us in this moment in our current moment that we're in? And sometimes it's amazing the way that our relationship to life can be reflected in and reflect the words that we read together in class. And certainly that has been meaningful to me over the weeks that we have studied together. So we'll start by reading Psalm 34 in Hebrew and a couple translations. So I think you should be able to see. David b'shanoto et tamo lifnei Avimelech vaygarshehu vayelach. Avaracha et Adonai b'chol eit tamid tilato b'fi Adonai titalel nafshi yishmeu anavim v'yismachu. Gadul Adonai iti unormama shemo yachdav. Darashti et Adonai va'anani umikol migurotai hitzilani. Hibitu elav v'naharu fneim al yechparu. Ze ani karav Adonai shamea mikol tzaratav hoshio. Chonem malach Adonai saviv l'riyav v'yalchatzim. Tamu re'u ki tov Adonai ashrei hagever yechesebo. Yiru et Adonai kiroshav ke'ein machzor livayav. Kefirim rashu v'ra'evu v'doreshe Adonai lo yachzru kol tov. Lechu vanim shim'u li yirat Adonai alamedchem. Mi ha'ish hechafetz chaim ohev yamim lirot tov. Nitzor leshoncha meira usfatecha midaber mirma. Sur meira v'aseh tov. Bakesh shalom v'rodfehu. Einei Adonai el tzadikim ve'oznav el shavatam. Pnei Adonai be'osei ra lachrit me'eretz zichram. Tzaku v'Adonai shamea mikol tzarotam hitzilam. Karov Adonai linishberei lev ve'et takei ruach yoshia. Rabot raot tzadik umikulam yatzilenu Adonai. Shomer kol atzmotav achat mehena lo nishbara. Timotet rasha ra'a v'sonei tzadik yeshamu. Hodeh Adonai nefesh avadav v'lo yeshmu kol hachosim bo. Of David when he feigned madness in the presence of Avimelech, who turned him out, and he left. I bless God at all times. Praise is ever in my mouth. I glory in God. Let the lowly hear it and rejoice. Exalt God with me. Let us extol the divine name together. I turned to God and I was answered. I was saved from all my terrors. People looked to God and are radiant. Here was a lowly man who called. God listened and delivered him from all his troubles. The angel of God camps around those who show awe and rescues them. Taste and see how good God is. Happy the one who takes refuge in the divine. Fear the eternal, you consecrated ones, for those who fear God lack nothing. Lions have been reduced to starvation, but those who turn to God shall not lack any good. Come, my children, listen to me. I will teach you what it is to fear God. Which of you are eager for life and desire years of good fortune? Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from deceitful speech. Shun evil and do good. Seek amity and pursue it. God's eyes are on the righteous, the ears attentive to their cry. God's face is set against evildoers to erase their names from the earth. They cry out and God hears, and God saves them from all their troubles. God is close to the brokenhearted. Those crushed in spirit are delivered. Though their misfortunes be many, God will save the righteous from them all, keeping all his bones intact, not one of them being broken. One misfortune is the death blow of the wicked. The foes of the righteous shall be ruined. God redeems the life of those who render service. No one who takes refuge in God shall be ruined. We'll read the contemporary English version. Written by David when he pretended to be crazy in front of Avimelech so that Avimelech would send him away and David could leave. Honor the Lord. I will always praise the Lord. With all my heart I will praise the Lord. Let all who are helpless listen and be glad. Honor the Lord with me. Celebrate his great name. I asked the Lord for help and he saved me from all my fears. Keep your eyes on the Lord. You will shine like the sun and never blush with shame. I was a nobody, but I prayed, and the Lord saved me from all my troubles. If you honor the Lord, his angel will protect you. Discover for yourself that the Lord is kind. Come to him for protection, and you will be glad. Honor the Lord. You are his special people. No one who honors the Lord will ever be in need. Young lions may go hungry or even starve, but if you trust the Lord, you will never miss out on anything good. Come, my children, listen as I teach you to respect the Lord. Do you want to live and enjoy a long life? Then don't say cruel things and don't tell lies. Do good instead of evil and try to live at peace. If you obey the Lord, he will watch over you and answer your prayers. But God despises evil people, and he will wipe them all from the earth till they are forgotten. When his people pray for help, he listens and rescues them from their troubles. The Lord is there to rescue all who are discouraged and have given up hope. The Lord's people may suffer a lot, but he will always bring them safely through. Not one of their bones will ever be broken. Wicked people are killed by their own evil deeds, and if you hate God's people, you will be punished. The Lord saves the lives of his servants. Run to him for protection, and you won't be punished. So first, any immediate reactions or responses? Murray.
Just an observation that I'm surprised that so many of the Hebrew passages appear through our liturgy and prayers, so many other prayers.
Great. So Murray points out that this psalm is used all over the place, and it's used in places where it feels like we have those words readily available, right? The whole psalm itself we use in its entirety, the complete psalm, as part of our Pesukei de Zimra on Shabbat morning, part of our warm up for prayer. But verses from these psalms are used all over the place. The verse 4, Godlu, is used at in our Torah service. The verses 10 and 11 are used at the end of Birkat Hamazon. The verses 13 and 14 are and 15 are a very commonly sung song, and for people who have been coming regularly for Pesukei de Zimra, ever since COVID, I've been doing that song, many weeks, not every week, but many weeks as part of our warm up for prayer. And so that a lot of the phrases from this psalm feel very, very familiar. Great. Other reactions? What does this psalm make you feel?
Happy. I like this song.
Yeah, okay. What do you like most about it, Alba?
I like the part where, I think it's in Pesach where we say the part in other places about young lions. Young lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. I really like that line.
Hmm.
I always see these kind of like lion pups, and they're running around all over the damn place, and then they just collapse from exhaustion. And sometimes youngsters have, even oldsters, but youngsters have this need to go running off in every direction at the same time. But if you just kind of like focus a little bit, you can save a little energy and maybe be more efficient and get a few more things done before you really do drop dead. So I really like number 10 a lot, verse 10 a lot.
Yeah. Nice. Murray?
Well, it seems to be a collection of almost like a roundup of prayers and and thankfulness and rules for guidance and all the good paths to follow, all the good deeds to do. It's an agglomeration of all of a summary, really, not a summary, but rather a collection of so many uh, good and of good guidance for life and how one can be happy.
All right. Murray also sees some happiness in this psalm, and Murray points out that this psalm it doesn't have the tightness of theme that some of our other psalms have had, right? It feels in some ways like a bunch of disparate pieces of advice. Now, that's what Murray said. Is that because we know this psalm best in its component sections, that we know verses from it, and the verses that we know from it we use in totally different context? Is that part of what makes us feel like this psalm is fragmented? Is it because this psalm is written as an acrostic, because it's an alphabetical acrostic, a poem where each letter of the alphabet gets its own line, that the need to write something for each letter has sort of impacted the poet's ability to have a very tight theme? Is that possible? I don't know. Maybe it's the length, right? When psalms get a little longer, it's harder sometimes to feel the sense of theme. Although on the other side, of that argument, the longest psalm in the book of Psalms, Psalm 119, that psalm has a very clear theme that holds throughout, throughout the whole. That's a very, very, very long psalm, several hundred verses or whatever. That psalm, that psalm has a very clear thematic message. So I don't know what, but this psalm is, we have found that psalms that are sort of between 6 and 12 verses are easier to hold on to. Like, there's an emotional impact of this psalm, and psalms that get a little longer than that it's harder to hold on to something that feels similar, that feels like one emotional resonance for the whole psalm. Mishka. Mishka, you had your hand up.
Just a very quick thing. When I think about the first translation, I was thinking it's kind of a little on the heavy side. And then the second one was just bright, or it felt that way to me.
Yes,
And
we've often found that the contemporary English version, because it's not a word for word translation, it's a paraphrase.
right, and
Because of that, it speaks in our vernacular in a way that really works for people. So that you're not that has been a repeated comment as we've looked at many of our psalms, that the contemporary English version, it feels brighter and
yes,
more,
exactly.
yeah. I myself, I feel like something is lost in that. Uh, I think that I mean, it's not that I think that translating in the vernacular necessarily loses something, but I do think, okay, if you translate do good instead of evil and try to live at peace, instead of translating that same line,
Keep thy thoughts
to
on me.
pursue peace, right? I do think that you miss something, right? There's a movement in the word pursue, in the Hebrew word rodef, that is lost in the translation that just says try to live at peace. I do think do good instead of evil and try to live in peace is a fair sense of what that verse means, but Bakei shalom v'rodfehu, like seek peace and pursue it. There's an active, there is a request that living a good life requires you to get off your butt. It is right, like try to live at peace. Like you could do that watching TV on your couch. Seek peace and pursue it. That requires actions. And I do think that something is lost in the translation that is less heavy. Like a heavier translation might actually. I interrupted you, Mishka.
No, what you were saying makes perfect sense to me. I just, you can kind of asked for a personal
Yeah,
response,
no, for
and
sure.
that's what I felt. And I agree. What's more effective, perhaps, in getting somebody to do something right, for want of a better word, but it being something familiar, where the lines are familiar, though to me familiar only in English. Well, not only, but I just felt I'm more likely to do something with that second translation, because it does
Yeah.
talk in more modern terms.
Yeah.
Just an aside question: the there was that bit of history about
Yes.
Abimelech and David. Why is it there?
Yeah, we'll come back to that. That's good. It's good. Right, we've talked about the historicity of some of these psalms, or where they come from, and this psalm gives us, basically an exact chapter from David's story that we can look at together and see the story. Yeah, Larry.
I don't think this is a happy psalm. I think it's the psalm pivots, I think, on verses 19 and 20, that the righteous will have afflictions. Life is full of afflictions. Be prepared for this. The righteous will have them. But the Lord delivereth him out of them all. He keepeth all his bones, not one of them be broken. That structurally you will survive. That the plan, as Murray says, this is the plan of life, that there are afflictions. And this is like a very realistic psalm. Don't expect this to be honey and roses, as my mother would say. This is life is suffering, but it's okay. Your bones are not going to be broken if you are righteous, and the Lord will deliver you. Not to worry, but get ready for it. It ain't going to be easy.
Yeah, I think that is it's a good insight, right? So the first the tone of the beginning of this psalm is very much sort of this joy and connection with God, and in what it means to be righteous. And then even this prayer, right? This sense that, lions get hungry, but righteous people don't get hungry, which we know isn't true. Righteous people do, but there is a prayer that maybe our relationship with God will protect us. And what is it that we have to do? We just have to be a good person and stay away from evil and seek peace and pursue it, to be in relationship to God. And then in verse 18, right? God hears our prayer, and God is with us when we're brokenhearted. And bad stuff's going to happen to the righteous, but God is with us through it, and nothing's going to be permanently bad. And so, right, like I think we're set up in the first part of the psalm to really think that it's all good for the righteous. But the psalm says, well, don't get so set on this idea that we're all good for the righteous, that it's all good for the righteous. And also, don't think the converse. If bad stuff happens to you, it's not because you're not righteous, right? Bad stuff happens to the righteous and to the wicked. The difference is that the bad stuff that happens to the wicked, it is more permanent. And the bad stuff that happens to the righteous, God is going to be with you through it. God is close to the brokenhearted.
Rabbi,
Yeah, Murray.
you have, how shall I say, startled me a little bit when you said, Kvirim Rashuva Revu, V'dor no Yachzor Tov, yet every time we do the prayer, the grace after a meal, we repeat it.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should delete it.
Yeah. So let's look at that, because I know people who don't say those words in the grace after meals because they feel like it's not true. All right. So, but let's look at it. Here's verses 10 and 11 are used in an anthology of verses at the end of grace after meals, at the end of Birkat Hamazon. So we start with Yiru et Adonai Kedoshav Kein Machzor L'Re'av, right? Fear the eternal, you consecrated ones, for those who fear God lack nothing. Right? That's verse 10 of our psalm. Right? Is it true that those who fear God lack nothing? Let's probe, what does it mean to lack nothing? Right? Clearly, in the context of the grace after meals, we mean that they're not going to go hungry. And indeed, that's the next line. Kefirim rashuv ra'evu, right? Young lions have been reduced to starvation, but those who turn to God shall not lack any good, meaning they're going to be fed, right? Then we praise God who is good, whose steadfast love is eternal. And then verse from Psalm 136 from Ashrei, you give it open-handedly, feeding every creature to its heart's content. Blessed is the man who trusts in God, whose trust is God alone. I have been young and now I am old, but I have never seen someone righteous abandoned or their children seeking bread. Right? What does it mean to think I have never seen someone righteous abandoned or their children seeking bread? And then may strength be granted to God's people. May God bless this people with well-being. And so, yeah, I mean, there is a real question, but I think that the people who put these verses together, clearly they were trying to say something about that being fed is part of what it means to live a righteous life. But I don't think that they had a theology where the righteous get food and the wicked don't get food, because they took these verses from our psalm And our psalm is very clear that that's not the way the world works. And so I think if you only had the verse from Psalm 37, and to be honest, we haven't looked at that psalm in its context yet, but we're going to in just a few weeks. So let's put a pin in it and remember. And when we get to Psalm 37, let's ask, what is that verse doing in its original context? The Na'ar Hayiti, I have been young and now I'm old. Let's see what that verse is doing in its original context. But knowing what we can see about our psalm, the first two verses of this paragraph, they don't actually mean what they say. They don't mean that only the righteous get fed, and that getting fed is the province of only the righteous, because we know that it says, right, that it says that the righteous are also going to have problems. That the righteous, right? Rabot ra'ut tzaddik. You can't look at verse 10 without also seeing verse 20. And I think that the rabbis who put those verses together, they wanted you to also think of rabot tzaddik and also of karov Adonai l'nishberei lev, right? They wanted you to think also of that the troubles of the righteous are many and that God is close to the brokenhearted, right? Those aren't the verses that they quoted, but I have been growing in my sense that when a verse from a psalm is quoted, that it's actually the entire psalm that's invoked, and that you're really getting that sense of the whole psalm. So, I don't think you need to worry that when you say this at the end of the grace after meals, that you're saying something that's theologically problematic. I think that in its original context and in its use in the grace after meals, it isn't a theological problem. It is, in fact, a prayer and a hope for closeness with God, that God is close to the brokenhearted, or God is close to those who are hungry. Larry, you're muted.
You also get the sense that the young lions are looking for, they're using violence to get something, to get blood. But the one who God cares for, he's not hungry because he's not hungry, but he lacks no good thing. He gets a different kind of bread. His happiness isn't from the things that you grab using worldly tools.
Yeah, I think there's something to that too, right? Like, I do think that in its context as part of the grace after meals, it is more literal than figurative. But perhaps not. Perhaps maybe the idea is that when you're satisfied and you're doing this grace after meals, you can also have a more spiritual understanding of what sustenance is. Sustenance isn't just that my belly is full, but also that I'm deeply in relationship with God.
My soul is filled.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something to that. Okay, somebody else had raised their hand. Was it Mark?
No.
No. Oh, it was Henry.
Same.
So Esther said the same. Right at the beginning, when Murray talked about how familiar some of these phrases were, that was, of course, the first thing. Not of course, but that also popped up to me. And what was interesting was it was the Hebrew that popped up, not the English, which doesn't happen all the time when we read these. And then I kept on thinking, well, is this a chicken and egg thing? So which came first, this psalm placed in this particular order, or was it an amalgamation of a lot of different prayers that had already been developed? And for some reason the order of all of this stuff, the order of this psalm was placed here.
Yeah,
So-
no, I think the answer to that is that the psalm comes first. Now, is it possible that the phrase Gadul Adonai iti u'nerabama shemo yachdav, is it possible that that phrase was a phrase that the psalmist heard in the context of prayer, in a context of prayer, and then incorporated into this psalm? I don't know. Like maybe
Right.
that's possible.
But-
But I think it's much more likely that the psalmist invented that phrase, and then it came to be that we use that in our prayer service.
What was interesting was, so that of course popped out to me immediately, and I thought, oh, that's the beginning of the Torah service, and then around line 14, that's the one of the last expressions before the end of the Amida, and I'm thinking, wow, is this just covering a lot of bases?
Yeah. Or maybe it's that that this psalm has some phrases that are so powerful that people that people really wanted to take them even separated from their context. Mark.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was an acrostic till you pointed it out. And knowing that it's an acrostic, it's a lot of ideas strung together by the author, and I can see why that would be using these different themes and different ideas and strung together.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. This translation, the Revised Jewish Publication Society translation, reminds us that it's an acrostic by putting the Hebrew letter.
Mhm.
One of the translations I didn't read, but I'll read it now. Richard Levy, he tries to translate it using an English acrostic. I find this generally like it's forced. We've seen him do this before, but here, let's give it a try. Of David, when he disguised his tastes before Avimelech, who let him go free, and he went on his way. A blessing I will bring to Adonai in every season. God's praise is always in my mouth. By my life, may God be praised. May the humble hear and be happy. Call out the greatness of Adonai with me. Let us raise high the divine name together. Daily I sought out Adonai, who responded. From all my dread you rescued me. Every face that looks to God shall glow. No shame shall ever veil it. From this poor man came a cry. Adonai heard and delivered him from all his troubles. God sends a messenger to set up camp around all who hold the Holy One in awe and rescues them. Have a taste and see how truly good is God. Happy the person who takes refuge with Adonai. If you see the awe of God, you share that holiness, and you will lack for nothing in your lives. Juvenile lions lack and lunge, hunting, hungry, but those who lean on Adonai lack little that is good. Keep faith, children. Come, listen to me, that I may teach you the awe of Adonai. Learn who the person is who longs for life, who loves days of seeing good. Monitor your tongue, let it speak no evil, and your lips, let them murmur no deceit. Negate evil doing, rather do good. Seek peace and harmony, pursue them. On the just do God's eyes rest. The ears of Adonai open to their cry. Prepare, O doers of evil, for the anger of God's face, cutting off any remnant of you from the earth. Quaking, the just cried out, and God heard, and from all their troubles, Adonai rescued them. Rays of God's presence warm the broken of heart. Adonai will deliver those whose spirits are crushed. Streams of sorrow may burden the just, but Adonai is preparing a rescue for all, tenderly guarding all of their bones. Not one of them will be broken. Unrighteousness destroys the unworthy. Vilifiers of the just will be condemned as guilty. Wait for Adonai's rescue, you servants of Adonai. Zeal towards God's refuge will protect you from guilt. I mean, truthfully, it's pretty good. a little forced, but pretty good. I'm impressed.
I like
You-
it.
You
Yeah.
can see, you can see how the acrostic is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, right. This is not a poetic, not a poetic um form that we use, and it or that we use regularly, but it is one that is very, very, very often used in Jewish prayer. And I think as we talked about the last time we saw an acrostic, the sense is that from A to Z, right, from Aleph to Taf, all of these things are true. And I, you know, I do think that it's a unique challenge. Challenge yourself to write a poem that makes sense and that feels unforced, but do it while also making it an alphabetical acrostic. It's hard even when you're not translating from Hebrew. So let's talk a bit about this where we start this psalm, a psalm of David when he changed his behavior before Abimelech, who drove him away, and he departed. So it couches our psalm directly in 1 Samuel.
Wasn't it Akish?
Chapter 21. So let's we can read that chapter together. Translation I wanted. All right. Say 1 Samuel 21. Where is it? Here we are. David went on his way, and Jonathan returned to the town. David went to the priest, Ahimelech, at Nov. Ahimelech came out in alarm to meet David, and he said to him, "Why are you not alone? Not a soul is with. Why are you alone? Not a soul is with you." And David answered the priest, "The king has ordered me on a mission, and he said to me, absolutely no one must know anything about the mission on which I am sending you, and for which I have given you orders. So I have directed my young men to such and such a place. Now then, what have you got on hand? Any loaves of bread? Let me have them, or whatever is available." The priest answered David, "I have no ordinary bread on hand. There's only consecrated bread, provided the young men have kept away from women." In reply to the priest, David said, "I assure you that women have been kept from us, as always. Whenever I went on a mission, even if the journey was a common one, the vessels of the young men were consecrated. All the more then may consecrated food be put into their vessels today." So the priest gave him consecrated bread, because there was none except the bread of display, which had been removed from God's presence, to be replaced by warm bread as soon as it was taken away. Now one of Saul's officials was there that day, detained before God. His name was Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman. David said to Ahimelech, "Haven't you got a spear or a sword on hand? I didn't take my sword or any of my weapons with me, because the king's mission was urgent." The priest said, "There is the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you slew in the valley of Elad, is over there, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want to take that one, take it, for there is none here but that one." David replied, "There is none like it. Give it to me." That day, David continued on his flight from Saul, and he came to King Achish of Gath. The courtiers of Achish said to him, "Why, that's David, king of the land. That's the one of whom they sing as they dance. Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands." These words worried David, and he became very much afraid of King Achish of Gath. So he concealed his good sense from them. He feigned madness for their benefit. He scratched marks on the doors of the gate and let his saliva run down his beard. And Achish said to his courtiers, "You see, the man is raving. Why bring him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this one to rave for me? Should he enter my house?" And David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard, they joined him down there. So this is the story that's referenced in the beginning of our psalm. David feigns madness. I'll just say a couple of things. One is the word in Hebrew, shanoto et ta'amo, right? A tam is a flavor or taste. That's why the translation I just read translated it as that David disguised his tastes. Tam also means reasoning. And so that's why it means he feigned madness. But it's not the only place in the psalm where that root is used, because that is also the root of the tet line. Ta'amu uru'u ki tov Adonai. Taste and see God's goodness. Which we saw some different translations of that, right? Taste and see how good God is one way to translate it. But a more standard way of translating is, oh, consider and see that God is good. That what is the relationship between taste and flavor and reasoning? Why is that the same word in Hebrew? And what does it mean, right, to disguise one's tastes, right? I would also say, right, there's a lot of mouth language here, right? Who nitzor l'shoncha meira, keep your tongue from evil, usfatecha medaber mimra, and your lips from speaking lies, right? Not just don't speak lies, but the very visceral mouth words, which maybe are also connected to this idea of taste and see how good God is. Also we use this psalm, as we were talking about, at the end of Grace After Meals, right? Is it an accident that it says, taste and see how good God is? And then we take the next two verses, Yiru et Adonai kidoshav kein machzur le'oyav kefir mashuv ra'evu v'darshei Adonai yachzru kol tov, right? That those two verses are used in our Grace After Meals. I think that there's a way in which this psalm is playing with this mouth, tongue, taste experience, like that's a through line, I think, through some of this psalm.
Words that come out of you are you, as much as your thoughts.
Interesting.
The word. In the beginning was the word.
So let's see. Robert Alter says the poet succeeds in articulating a moving vision of hope for the desperate. Part of the spiritual greatness of the Book of Psalms, part of the source of its enduring appeal through the ages is that it profoundly recognizes the bleakness, the dark terrors, the long nights of despair that shadow most lives, and against all this evokes the notion of a caring presence that can reach out to the brokenhearted. I think that's a very pretty summary of this psalm. And Rabbi Richard Levy writes, we often say, why does God not respond to us the way that God did to the people in the Bible? The problem with this question is that we usually don't know how God responded in the Bible, or more precisely, what led people to believe that what they heard or saw was God responding to them. This psalm suggests some of the ways of sensing God's response. The answer is by inspiring human beings to act in a godly way, thus manifesting God's care of other people through our actions. While waiting for God's rescue from our own troubles, the more we act in a godly way to others, the more we will grow into a refuge for them, a refuge big enough to harbor us as well. Kind of a nice sermon. Rabbi Spitzer, it's nice to have you in class this morning. How are you?
comment?
When you read Psalm 34, what do you think about?
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Okay, I'm still seeing. Let me change my screen here. Um. I don't know. What do I think about when I read the psalm? Um. I enjoy thinking about how the interconnectedness of all these different prayers and usages, however we figure out how this came to be, the fact that this psalm has found its way into all these different liturgical uses. And then you go back to the psalm because we're familiar with all these lines from all these other places. And then we come back into the psalm and it's like seeing an old friend back in the psalm, but in an old friend in a new context.
Mm.
And except that that's the original context. That's the irony. And then putting it all together and seeing it enriches both the reading of the psalm and the reading of the other prayers.
Well, you came in right as we were talking about the use of this psalm at the end of Grace After Meals. So I don't know if you heard everything that I said about that, but I'm wondering, do you think that when you think about those two verses, not just as what they mean out of context, but when you think about them as invoking this whole psalm, does it change how it feels to say them at the end of your Katamazon?
I really like that. I really like that, and I'm going to pay attention to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really curious to know about how that verse from Psalm 37 feels in context. I look forward to I'm gonna wait and see that in a couple weeks. Yeah. So I started off, some people came in after I gave an introduction, but I started off by reminding people where we are in the Jewish calendar of between Yom HaShoah, which was yesterday, and Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, which is next week, and in the specific context of the desecration of the Congregation Avodat Achim cemetery that occurred over the last few weeks, and which we are honoring together as a community today by coming to the cemetery at 5:30 for an opportunity to be together and to grieve together, to recite psalms together as a community. And one question that I had is, what does this psalm do for you in that context, in the context of the where we are in our liturgy this week, where we are in the Jewish calendar, and also where we are emotionally as a community? Does this psalm resonate in this moment? And in what ways does it resonate? Henry, what did you want to share?
No, it's hard to remember, being very long passage. I just remember something at the end and I thought, oh my God, this is like today.
Yeah, what this God redeems the life of those who render service. No one who takes refuge in God shall be ruined.
How about Karov Adonai L'Nishbarei Lev?
Yeah, God is close to the brokenhearted.
Mm.
God is close to the brokenhearted. Certainly, that is one of the thoughts, one of the messages that I definitely want to share. I said to Daryl yesterday when he was putting together the announcement that we were going to get together on today at 5:30 at the cemetery, I said, I'd really like to invoke the idea of God as being the rock of Israel, Tzur Yisrael. And I think that's I'm gonna speak about that this evening. I'm gonna read a couple of Psalms. But I really think, there's the this idea that that we're in our brokenheartedness, we feel a sense of God's presence. That's very powerful. We're open to that.
It's an interesting line altogether because sometimes in our brokenheartedness, we feel an absence of God.
Hmm.
And I think it's a wish, a desire, a hand reaching out as much as it is a declaration.
Yeah, the Talmud tells us that we should bless the good and the bad. Well, you're getting a little preview of what I might say tonight. But the Talmud says we're supposed to bless the good and the bad. And the Talmud gives us blessings to say when we hear bad news, when bad stuff happens. And you might think, what do you mean bless the bad? Like, are we supposed to be happy that the bad stuff is happening? Is this some kind of theology of, oh, well, at least we're growing from it? Like, I could do without it, right? And the Talmud also says that. The Talmud says, I don't want the suffering or the reward for the suffering. Don't give me any of it, right? I don't want the pain, even if there's a reward for that pain afterward. But the rabbis say to bless the good and bless the bad, and it's easy when good things happen to be able to say the words Shechianu, Vikiyamanu, Vigianu, that God has sustained us and given us life and brought us to this moment to connect to God in moments of joy, in moments of gratitude. That is, for many people, it is easier. And the insight of this verse and of the rabbis is that we bless the bad not because we think that God is necessarily the source of the evil things that happen to us, not necessarily because we think that we're learning something from them, but because both good experiences and bad experiences present an opportunity to be in relationship with God. And so we respond to the bad also with a leaning into relationship. Yeah, Henry.
So I guess in my statement previous, what I guess I was thinking of was what's happening on campuses around the country today, and you have to feel for everybody on both sides. We all have our preferences, but you have to make sure that everybody is protected and allowed to say what they think should be, what it is from their hearts, of course, without violence. But this reminded me of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to guard our tongues from evil and our lips from deceitful speech. Yeah. At least if we want, if we desire long life. If we want
And positive dialogue.
If we want to be chafetz chaim, if we are seekers and desirers of life, then we should definitely guard our tongues from evil. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We will meet again next week, and we will study Psalm 35. Just so that you can start to prepare your calendars. We will be meeting during May,